Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbiville.
It's a simple fact. World War II could not have been fought, much less won, without the work of the Navy Seabees, formerly known as the United States Navy Construction Battalion. The Seabees were builders of airstrips, of bridges, piers, everything from hospitals to Quonset huts, even builders of bomb shelters. From November 1942 to a year later, the 14th Seabees Battalion was stationed on perhaps the ultimate hotspot of the Pacific Campaign, Guadalcanal. Company C painter First Class James Rothermel recalls that year with amazing clarity and pride. Today, 87-year-old James Rothermel and his wife Dorothy Ann live retired in Brenham, a retired educator, former Brenham City Councilman. James Rothermel takes special pride in the Washington County Veterans Memorial that he spearheaded 3 years ago. James Rothermel, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Let's talk first about the Seabees, people who might not know what the Seabees are or what they were and the work they did. I know you told me that mostly the Seabees were a little bit more mature, older people because they had already learned their craft actually before they went into the service, right?
Right. Mostly all of them were real strong in their craft or their occupation that they were in civilian life. Mm-hmm. And most of them were about 35 to 38 years of age, and that's for all CB battalions, the early battalions that were organized early 42. And I, being a painter, a construction painter, had about 6 or 7 years of painting. I was fortunate enough to have earned a rating of third-class petty officer.
Right. You, as a civilian, I know that one of your jobs was to go to the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station and do painting there as a civilian, but it was when there that you got that surge of patriotism and went to Houston and signed up, right?
Right. And I had a very interesting thing to happen to me there. I had an ensign that was questioning me and asking me questions and me filling out the questionnaire, and he said, well, with all the experience you have, you shouldn't be going into the regular Navy. You need to be going into the Seabees. And I said, what are the Seabees? And he explained it to me. And he said, I'll tell you what, I can give you a third-class petty officer rating. That made up my mind. Since I had been at Corpus Christi, I knew about the Navy quite a bit.
I want to fast forward because your stories from Guadalcanal are quite interesting and quite amazing, but you went to Camp Allen in Virginia, and that's where the 14th Seabees really were commissioned at that time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mostly made up of sailors from Texas and Oklahoma, right?
Right. Yes, primarily Texas and Oklahoma. There were a few from each state. There's several states had maybe a dozen or so, but it's too many to remember.
Right. You went overseas to Caledonia first, I believe.
Right. We shipped out of San Francisco from Treasure Island, and we went on September 9 of 42, and we landed up in New Caledonia waiting orders. And while we were there, I worked on the hospital that was being built, doing some painting and what have you, whereas most of the other guys had to stay on the ship, and there was no liberty there, and so consequently didn't know much about New Caledonia.
Right. You were there for a couple of months, I think.
About 2 months, yeah.
And then on to Guadalcanal. Did your shipmates have a pretty good idea of what a hot spot Guadalcanal was in the war at that time, about the action that was going on there?
Well, it was military scuttlebutt that we were going to Guadalcanal, but we never had really official orders presented to us that we were going there. Mm-hmm. But we had, the scuttlebutt and the talk, we usually were able to figure out where we were going.
Right. Now, y'all hit the ground running there. I mean, because immediately when you got there, I know one of your first jobs, you told me, was to build an emergency landing strip. Is that right? You needed to get a strip on the ground quickly.
Yes. And we did that within, we started on about November the 29th, and December the 15th we completed. It was an emergency landing strip for crippled planes from aircraft carriers and those from Henderson Field, rather than land on the ship or Henderson Field to tear up the field with the crippled plane. We had this built for that purpose.
I want to get to the story of Captain James Carney in a moment because it's quite a compelling story, but I want people to get the idea of exactly the job that you all had. You took your own equipment over there as far as the bulldozers and the dump trucks and the things that you needed. But as far as the supplies, the gravel, and that it took
No.
to just take a piece of land, a piece of terrain that was not suited for a landing strip, and create a landing strip that bombers were going to land on. I cannot imagine what a daunting task that might have been.
Yes, we were very fortunate. We had, bulldozers, maintainers, and drag lines, and cranes, and whatever, what have you, and 500 or more men on tractors and bulldozers and what have you can do a whole lot of work in just a short while.
Indeed, and you had to.
Yes, we did.
You did.
And I had to, yeah.
The gravel that you used, I believe,
yeah,
you got that out of the river, right?
Yes, we got it out of the Nalambu River, and that was the base that we put on before we put the Marsden mat. It's a mat, it's a steel mat that hooks together and forms a flat surface, and the planes could land on that without worrying about weather or what have you.
Your commander for the 14th was Captain James Carney.
That's
Talk about
right.
Captain Carney.
Yeah, well, he, when we finished the field on December the 15th, he went up to Henderson Field and borrowed a plane. Being an aviator himself, picked up a gunner and a radio operator, and he came and tested the field, made several landings, and when he got through, we all surrounded the plane, and he commended us very highly, and then he got into the plane to go back, to take it back to Henderson Field, and as it went over Skylark Bay, motor failed and crashed in the ocean, and he and the radio operator gunner were killed.
Mm-hmm.
And he is buried there at Guadalcanal, and at the burial ground there.
And as a tribute to him, the two airstrips that you were about to build after the emergency strip were both named after him.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah, we built Carney 1 and Carney 2. And Carney 1 was a field for, which had about 7,000-foot runway and taxiway, and it would accommodate B-24 and 25, 26s and 17s, and all big bomber planes.
Right.
And these planes went ahead and softened up the islands as we moved towards Japan.
Right. And Carney 2, which came later, was a longer runway, about
Right.
9,000 feet, I
9,000
believe.
feet, right.
And this was built with concrete landing areas, is that right?
Right. Yeah. Now we put on that one. We on the end, both ends of the field there was concrete. There was concrete turnaround.
Right.
And then that way it didn't tear up the Marsden mats so bad, where they had something really solid to hit. But those big B-24s to hit on that Marsden mat, it had to give.
Sure.
And so consequently, their landing part was concrete.
At the same time that you were building these landing strips, I know that wasn't your only job. You all were doing a lot of different things at one time, and one of the things was your campsite, and building your campsite, which included what? A hospital, a sawmill, the campsite itself, Quonset huts, Dallas huts. Yeah. So you all were doing a lot of different things at one time.
Yeah, building roads, building
Mm-hmm.
bridges, and we built one particular bridge that I do recall the dimensions on it. It was about 20 feet wide, 210 feet long, built of solid mahogany, and it was sawed by our sawmill that we had set up.
The numbers are phenomenal about what you all produced as far as boards and from the sawmill and all of that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. While this was all going on, you were looking out for the enemy. While you were not involved in any hand-to-hand combat or direct combat, you were in a defensive mode all the time, because
Right.
there were Japanese flyers above you looking at you, and you had to contend with air raids the whole time, right?
Right. Nearly every evening, we had what we call a washing machine. Charlie would come over and fly around and harass us, and he usually come in about midnight or thereafter, so we wouldn't get a whole good night's sleep, and it was more or less harassment than anything. And before he left, he would drop his bomb somewhere on the island. And then we had a group up in the mountains that had a heavy piece of artillery, I guess a 75 or 90 millimeter, I don't know how big it was, but it would lob shells over on noon at our mess halls, so we'd have to run and then go back and eat and all that stuff. Now but he never tried to hit a mess hall, and never tried to hit anybody. It was just harassment.
Guadalcanal was no walk in the park. It was a pretty miserable place as far as the weather, the heat, the mosquitoes, and so another enemy that you were battling was illness.
Malaria, yes. Oh man, yes, malaria was very bad, and we had casualties from malaria every day, and I guess totally while we were there nearly a year, and we lost about 500 men to malaria. And
I know that right after you completed your campsite, it was just, a couple of weeks later that a torrential rain caused a flood to that campsite, and a lot of the patients that were at the hospital at the time had to be evacuated. Is that right?
That's true. Yes. We had a flood that hadn't been that big for years, so the natives told us, and we had to wade out waist deep and shoulder deep water. It was shoulder deep for me. Most of the guys were waist deep because I was kind of small. But we would move to the beach to the 20th Army Command, and they put us up for the night and fed us breakfast the next morning. And we went back. The river went back down by noon that next day. And then about 3 days later, we had another flood, but we didn't have to move out. It wasn't quite as great.
I want people to get an idea of exactly what you all were able to accomplish, because the Seabees, in my estimation, they build something out of nothing, is what your job is. Right. You write in your summary of your service, the 14th compiled the following numbers while on Guadalcanal. Highest water output in one day, 89,460 gallons. Nearly 2 million gallons for the month of June 43. 46 tons of ice for June. Sawmill production of 7,200 board feet in one day, 188,500 board feet in 1 month, and extraction of 127,000 tons of gravel from the river to build these airstrips. Those numbers are just mind-boggling. I guess they're still mind-boggling to you.
They are, really are.
That you could do something like that. The second airstrip of Kearney Field was built, and you also, another one of your projects I know was building a tank farm for gasoline and oil, right?
Yeah.
Talk about what was involved there.
Well, we had the sheet metal people and welders and what have you built the tanks. They had the sheet metal that was sent to them and riveted. And then one of our jobs was to paint it, and then our job was to build a pipeline out into the bay where the ships would not have to, could come up rather to this buoy and pump the oil right on into the tanks.
Right. Built a bridge too, 210-foot bridge, I believe, something like that.
Yes, right.
So you all, the Seabees, that was just their job. Now your particular job, you were a painter.
Right.
If it needed to be painted, you painted it.
We painted it.
Talk more specifically about what your job was and what you did.
Well, primarily, I was in the shop.
Right.
But we had a small crew, about 4 or 5 persons, and when it built the hospital, we had to paint the Quonset huts. We had to camouflage them, rather, and we painted inside. And like the officers' mess and our mess hall, we painted inside to make it look nice. And whatever needed painting, well, we did it. And we primarily were a sign shop. We did a lot of signs, not only just for my outfit, for all other outfits on the island that needed sign work done.
Talk about Easter Sunday of 1943.
Yes, now that was quite a enterprise. On these flat areas where we built our airfield, there was grass about 6 to 8 feet tall, and they cleared an area there for us, and I don't know if several hundred, maybe 1,000 people gathered from all units that morning. We had the Navy band, and it played, and we had one of the chaplains, I can't recall who it was, and one of the native preachers preached a sermon also for us in Pidgin English, and had a native choir, and it was at sunrise, Easter Sunday morning, and we had for breakfast, then we had boiled eggs and toast, I think it was. That's very simple, but it was enjoyed by everyone, and the camaraderie that it created among those outfits that were around us, I think it was the most wonderful day for all of those that attended.
Indeed, it's obviously something that you remember well.
That's right, yeah.
You are a historian of your service and of World War II, and you've brought some pictures that to share with us. And I want to go ahead and go to some of those photographs right now that were taken of you and by you. Here is the young sailor, James Rothermel. Do you remember when this was taken?
Yeah, it was in 1942 in San Francisco. This was just right prior to being shipped out. And my Navy buddy, best buddy, Bill Oscom, took that picture with his camera.
You look young and eager and ready to go.
Yeah, I was.
Going to go ahead and move on. Here's another picture of you and some of your buddies here. Talk about that picture. Where was that taken?
This was taken at Guadalcanal, and this is right outside of where the Quonset huts for the hospital that we were building. And the two guys standing on the left is L.V. Bryant and Enoch Henderson on the right, and myself on the left squatting, and Stedman on the right. I can't recall his first name right now.
It looks like you're very hot there.
Yes, we were about 10 degrees off the equator, around 120 degrees daily.
Okay. Got another one here. Now this is a photograph of you actually in your paint shop. Talk about that. That was at Okinawa a little bit later on, right?
Well, yes, and that's a typical paint shop that we also had in Guadalcanal. That Bill Oscom's at the easel, and with Thorson on the left, and myself on the right. And so...
This was your office?
That was our office, right.
That was your office?
That was our shop, yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on, and we're going to go back to a photograph here of... This is back in Guadalcanal, right?
This is our living area, this Company C area, and we lived in tents, and you can see just partial on the right, a Army cot. And this was very early at our stay at Guadalcanal. Later on, we floored the tents and screened them in and had doors, and so consequently it made pretty nice living, but at that point it was pretty rugged.
Indeed, and that's you in the foxhole
that's
right there.
Myself in the foxhole, yeah, or the bomb shelter. It would hold 8 people very well.
You didn't get a lot of chances to sleep a whole lot in your tent. I guess a lot of nights you were spending the night in the foxhole because of Pistol Pete and Washing Machine Charlie, right?
Yeah, and it was really quite a sight to see when the Washing Machine Charlie came over. We had searchlights, and every once in a while they'd get him in the lights, and there'd anti-aircraft guns would shoot at him, and we'd watch. We'd sit out there and hooray and hurrah and holler and say, dirty things about the Japanese. But anyway, but they did. They kept us. You'd get up, and then you'd shell you from the sea every once in a while, not very often. But and we did have one night where a big bomb dropped in our camp area. And,
right, 500-pound bomb.
500-pound bomb, and
that got you scurrying, right?
Sir?
That got you scurrying.
Yeah, it got us stirring, and that's how come we had this type of bomb shelter.
Right.
Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Early in your training, even when you got out of high school in Brenham, woodworking was one of the skills that you learned, and that came to use later on. We've got a photograph right here of a plaque, actually, that you and I believe another one of your fellow sailors
William Oscom, he's passed on. Now, that plaque is made out of mahogany and maple, and those made strips and then glued together. And the top part up there where it shows the bulldozer and the guy looking through a level is in platinum leaf, and the lettering on the plaque is gold leaf. And there were 2 of those made. One went to Washington, D.C., and the other one is located at Port Hueneme, California, at the CV National Museum.
That's something that I know that you're very, very proud of. It really is. Got another photograph. Now this is there's a bunch of happy sailors right here in this photograph that we're going to look at here next. This is I guess this is pretty much at the end of your overseas duty. Talk about this.
It was coming home from Okinawa, and I tell you, we were a happy group. you just couldn't imagine how happy we were when the war was over with, and we were going to go home to our loved ones and what we were used to, and going to try to change our lives, and which I did. I don't know whether you have something on that or not, but yes, this was quite something.
We will be
I
talking
came home
about
on the Yorktown,
right.
and that was another experience with the fact that they cleared the hangar deck, and they marked off a place for each one of your bedrolls, and had about 5,000 people sleeping and staying on a hangar deck for 14 days coming from Tokyo, Japan.
Right, right, right. I want to talk to you here now, and then we'll go to a picture in just a moment, about the Washington County Veterans Memorial. This is sort of your child that you sort of spearheaded for a couple of years in your life, and now it's a reality in Brenham. Talk about it, and we're going to go to a photograph of it while you're talking about it.
Well, the presidents, the commanders of the American Legion post there at Brenham, we have a Galva Club, and this Galva Club had some money on hand, and the building of the National World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. was being started, and big drive for money, and so we voted to send $500 to this memorial for its completion, and went back to the post and reported what we did. Then it was mentioned then that maybe we ought to build us a memorial here for the veterans of Washington County, and that went on for a couple of years. We discussed it many hours, many times, and one night I says, look, we've talked this to death, and it's time for us to do something about it. And the commander pointed at me and he says, Rothermel, you are chairman of this group. And he pointed to 2 other people, and then we worked for about 2.5 years and finally finished it.
It's something you're very proud of, and you took me the other day to it, and I was very honored to see it.
That's the most honorable thing I think I've ever done in my life.
Well, I would say in your service in World War II, I would say it would be right up there with it. We've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left, but you finally leave Guadalcanal. You come back to the States for about a year. You're in California. You get to go home for a while, but you're not through going overseas. You head back over to Hawaii and then to Okinawa. Sort of talk about your post-Guadalcanal service.
Well, we went to Hawaii, and we were to train. Went for training, for jungle training, and
you'd already been there and done that.
That's right, and it was the most depressing thing I guess my outfit had to do, and I was one of them that really griped about it myself. And then we went from Hawaii to Saipan and loaded LSTs and what have you. And about April the 25th, I went and looked back. Is when we landed at Okinawa. The initial landing was April the 1st. Right. And we were there then at Okinawa through till September the 2nd, when the war was over with. And
I know you told the story about when you were going over on an LST,
right,
and a torpedo came right out. You were on an LST that was loaded with gasoline.
That's right.
And a torpedo, which was evidently geared for a much larger ship, came underneath you and fortunately missed.
Yeah. It just went under through it, and why, I don't know, but anyway.
So there's a lot of defense involved in what you were doing. And I guess I know that you count yourself very fortunate.
I have. I've been very fortunate.
You were discharged from the Navy, honorably, of course, and you went into a career of education. I know you were a principal at Ganado and at Schulenburg. Talk a little bit about your career. We've got a couple of minutes after your service.
Well, then I went into the teaching profession. I taught at Brenham 3 years. I was a general classroom teacher there, and at Ganado and Schulenburg I was a high school principal. And then from Ganado I went to Pasadena to San Jacinto College and became an instructor. And a short while after I was department chairman of business, and then I became division chairman of business administration department. And I retired from San Jacinto College with 14 years there in 1978, and spent a couple more years in Pasadena, and we decided to move to Brenham, and we're there now and still going strong.
And still enjoying it.
Enjoying it, yeah.
You and Dorothy Ann, your wife, are about to celebrate, I believe, your 58th wedding anniversary
right.
a little bit
August
later
24th,
this month.
yeah.
August the 24th. And I know Dorothy Ann is very involved in auxiliary with there in Brenham with VFW, American Legion.
American
right?
Legion.
American Legion. Right.
Yeah, and I was commander of the post, and she was president of the post at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was a husband and wife team.
You were even a politician. You were on the Brenham City Council and
Yeah,
Mayor Pro Tem for a few years.
Yeah,
Is that
I was
right?
on the council for 14 years, and of those 14 years, 8 of them were Mayor Pro Tem.
You have a grandson. You have 6 grandchildren, but one of them, Matthew, I know, served in Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom,
Right.
and he's currently in Africa. A
Yeah.
young man that I know that you and your wife are very proud of.
Yes, we are very proud of him, and he's hoped to come home in December, but he's over there now being a humanitarian, and they're working, helping people over there in Africa, and that's their goal.
Well, God bless him, and I know your 2 sons and your grandchildren, and thank you very, very much for visiting with us today.
Thank you for letting me be a part of this. I tell you, I'm so proud that you're doing this. I'll watch it every chance I get.
Thank you,
Yeah.
James Rothermel. I visited the Rothermel's home in Brenham this past week, and it's almost like a military museum. Indeed, a testament to not just his own service, but to his personal pride to have served, and specifically in the United States Navy Construction Battalion. Today, we salute the Navy Seabees and Painter First Class James Rothermel for his service. And while in Brenham, please don't miss the magnificent Washington County Veterans Memorial. Please thank a veteran today, and thanks to our underwriter, First National Bank. I'm Tom Turbiville. Join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.
Money, and so we voted to send $500 to this memorial for its completion, and went back to the post and reported what we did. Then it was mentioned then that maybe we ought to build us a memorial here for the veterans of Washington County. And that went on for a couple of years. We discussed it many hours, many times. And one night I said, look, we've talked this to death, and it's time for us to do something about it. And the commander pointed at me and he said, Rothermel, you are chairman of this group. And he pointed 2 other people, and then we worked for about 2.5 years and finally finished it.
It's a beautiful place, right beside the famous Fireman's Park baseball stadium in Brenham, something that James Rothermel is very proud of.
That's the most honorable thing I think I've ever done in my life.
After his discharge from the Navy, James Rothermel started a long and distinguished career in education, spending the last several years at San Jacinto College.
Then I went into the teaching profession. I taught at Brenham 3 years. I was a general classroom teacher there, and at Grenada and Schulenburg I was a high school principal. And then from Grenada I went to Pasadena to San Jacinto College and became an instructor. And a short while after, I was department chairman of business, and then I became division chairman of business administration department. And I retired from San Jacinto College with 14 years there in 1978, and spent a couple more years in Pasadena, and we decided to move to Brenham, and we're there now and still going strong.
In even later years, James Rothermel served on the Brenham City Council and as Mayor Pro Tem. Public service indeed in his blood. James and Dorothy Ann Rothermel have 2 sons and 6 grandchildren. One of those grandkids, Matthew, has already served in Iraq, is now a Marine in Africa where he's involved in humanitarian efforts. On Monday, we will observe the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. It's a pleasure to honor them year-round here. Veterans like James Rothermel, painter, builder, veteran, and teacher. I'm Tom Turbiville. This is Bravo Brazos Valley.
Had about 6 or 7 years of painting. I was fortunate enough to have earned a rating of 3rd-class petty officer.
Off to the Pacific. James Rothermel's outfit had heard the rumors they were headed to one of the war's hot spots, Guadalcanal.
It was military scuttlebutt that we were going to Guadalcanal, but we never had really official orders presented to us that we were going there. But we had, the scuttlebutt and the talk. We usually were able to figure out where we were going.
Indeed, the fighting at Guadalcanal was raging at that time. First thing, build an emergency landing strip for crippled planes to land while fighting the Japanese.
We started on about November the 29th, and December the 15th we completed. It was an emergency landing strip for crippled planes from aircraft carriers and those from Henderson Field, rather than land on the ship or Henderson Field to tear up the field with the crippled plane. We had this built for that purpose.
The equipment they needed to build what they built was taken with them for the most part. On boats, they pretty much had what they needed.
Yes, we were very fortunate. We had, bulldozers, maintainers, and drag lines, and cranes, and what have you, and 500 or more men on tractors and bulldozers and what have you can do a whole lot of work in just a short while.
What they didn't have, they came up with. And they built some more. Tomorrow, the agony of Guadalcanal during the height of the Pacific Campaign, fighting more than just the enemy. With painter First Class James Rothermel of Brenham. I'm Tom Turbiville. This is Bravo Brazos Valley.
Plane, we had this built for that purpose.
Captain James Carney was the commander of Rothermel's battalion. He has a tragic memory of Captain Carney.
When we finished the field on December the 15th, he went up to Henderson Field and borrowed a plane. Being an aviator himself, picked up a gunner and a radio operator, and he came and tested the field, made several landings, and when he got through, we all surrounded the plane, and he commended us very highly. And then he got into the plane to go back, take it back to Henderson Field, and as it went over Skylark Bay, motor failed and crashed in the ocean, and he and the radio operator gunner were killed. And he is buried there at Guadalcanal and at the burial ground there.
The work continued. The next job was to build 2 larger runways, more permanent runways, on terrain that it would seem impossible to do. The strips were appropriately named.
Yeah, we built Carney 1 and Carney 2. And Carney 1 was a field which had about 7,000-foot runway and taxiway, and it would accommodate B-24 and 25, 26s, and 17s, and all big bomber planes.
Right.
And these planes went ahead and softened up the islands as we moved toward Japan.
Now, the Navy Seabees did a whole lot more than just build airstrips.
Building roads, building bridges, and we built one particular bridge that I do recall the dimensions on it. It was about 20 feet wide, 210 feet long, built of solid mahogany, and it was sawed by our sawmill that we had set up.
And all this while in a defensive mode, because air raids by the Japanese, a daily concern.
Nearly every evening, we had what we call a washing machine. Charlie would come over and fly around and harass us, and he usually come in about midnight or thereafter, so we wouldn't get a whole good night's sleep, and it was more harassment than anything. And before he left, he would drop his bomb somewhere on the island. And then we had a group up in the mountains that had a heavy piece of artillery, I guess a 75 or 90 millimeter, I don't know how big it was, but it would lob shells over at our mess halls, so we'd have to run and, then go back and eat and all that stuff. But he never tried to hit a mess hall, never tried to hit anybody. It was just harassment.
The Washington County Veterans Memorial is the pride and joy of James Rothermel. He spearheaded its construction 3 years ago. Tomorrow, we'll talk about that as we finish up the story of painter First Class James Rothermel, proud Seabee of World War II. I'm Tom Turbiville. This is Bravo Brazos Valley.